and welcome to another video. This is episode 53 of the podcast, and let's get right into it. Ta-da! I finally finished the Johanne loop sweater by Other Loops. What a journey it has been, and I'm glad that it's over. I initially had wanted to make this with some 100% alpaca yarn from Järbo, and then I switched over to Ístex Plötulopi. This is a 100% unspun Icelandic yarn with a yardage of 150 meters per 50 grams. As for the colors, the main color is chocolate heather, which has a code of 1032, and the contrast color is dark amber heather 1426. As for needle sizes, I used 4mm for the color work. Then for the plain stuff I used 3mm, and then for all of the ribbing I used 2mm needles. As for the construction, this is a pretty straightforward drop shoulder construction. You start at the back, you work a number of short rows, then you knit straight down, you do the armhole shaping, then you work the front, neck shaping, armhole shaping, also short rows, and then you connect the front to the back, knit down, pick up stitches for the sleeves, you do some short rows at the top of the sleeve, and then you knit down, you do the ribbing, and then you do the ribbing for the neck, and you are done. I made a number of modifications. If you're familiar with my channel, you'll know that I like more of a fitted side. Well, this is not extremely fitted, but it's definitely less positive ease than was recommended in the pattern. The smallest size has a bust circumference of 108 centimeters, and the pattern recommends positive ease between 20 to 30. I would have had a minimum of 26 centimeters, and I have now found that what works for me is something that is max 20 centimeters. So what I did essentially is I made a lot of modifications, and now this is about 99 centimeters, and I think it suits me and my personal style quite a bit. So I'm very happy with that. As for other modifications, the original gauge of the pattern was 22 stitches, and my stitch gauge was 20 stitches. So what I did was I calculated the bust circumference if I would use my stitch gauge and knit up the smallest size, and then I decided how much of stitches I would have wanted to take off from the body. And so I also had to look at the color motif, how that exactly worked, so that I could center the color motif and have the sides the same, if that makes makes any sense. That, yeah, so that it would be mirror images, if you would put a mirror. I'm sorry if I'm over explaining this, but yes, so I decided how many stitches I would have liked taken away from all 4 points, so the left and right side from the front and left and right side from the back. And I looked at the model and I saw that the neckline wasn't too open, so I decided to keep those measurements and just take out all of the excess yarn fabric from the shoulder, so that it would be less of a drop shoulder. And I mean, yeah, it still looks very much so like a drop shoulder, maybe a bit more baby-esque. I think I've seen somewhere somebody call it a baby drop shoulder, but I think it's quite drop shouldery. In any case, what else did I do? Yeah, so since the stitch count was different than in the pattern, I had to change the short rows. So essentially I still wanted the same exact height of the short rows, just not the same length because of less stitches, of course. And so I basically calculated the ratio of the short rows and then applied that to my own stitch count. That's essentially what I did, and it worked out. I did something similar to the shoulder short rows as well, and that worked out very well. I do have to say, well, you can see it here, but the left sleeve is a bit tighter than the right sleeve. The thing is that I didn't count how many stitches I picked up on the right. Essentially what I did was I actually didn't, I picked up too many stitches the first time around, and I watched a video from Roxanne Richardson, then picked a ratio of 3 to 4, so 3 stitches for every 4 pickup opportunities at the side. So for every 4 rows you pick up 3 stitches, and then at the bottom you just pick up with a ratio of 1 to 1. So I chose that ratio. My initial one was 4 to 5. That's why it was way too big, and I was quite happy with that. So I knit up the sleeve, and I just thought that it would be fine. And so I did the same thing with this sleeve, but for some reason this one came out quite a bit tighter. If you really focus on it, you'll notice it. I do notice it slightly, that it hugs me a bit nicer, but I don't know. I think I haven't completely, well, I haven't wet blocked it yet. I've only steam blocked it with my iron and a piece of cotton. I stretched out the sleeves because they were a bit on the short side, and that actually worked quite nice. So I think once I wet block this, I will try and stretch out this sleeve a bit. But if I'm being very honest, I actually like this sleeve more than this one. It seems like there's just a bit too much fabric. It kind of has this warping effect. I'm not too sure where that comes from. I had the same issue with another sweater, the Sailor Pullover by Mariko Oka from Daruma's pattern book number 8, I believe. And that was extreme because the circumference of the sleeve was quite large. And I ended up just taking out the sleeves because it was a drop shoulder construction and it was very wide, and so it fell over my shoulders quite a bit, and I could just use it as an oversized vest slash dolman blouse or something like that. So it worked out, but I am actually not too sure what's causing this biasing. I think that's the word, biasing, yes. And I guess it has to do with knitting in the round. I don't think I would get the same effect if I were to knit it flat and then seam it up. That's at least my theory at the moment. I think another thing that might have to do with it is that my stitches happen to be very long. I don't know if that makes any sense, but when I knit continental, my row gauge is quite close to my stitch gauge. This is something that has puzzled me over the past week, because I would expect that if you were to knit looser, which I do with a knitting continental style compared to English style, that the stitch gauge would also change, but for some reason that's not the case. My ratio is just off, and I'm not really sure what I can do to fix that. Maybe I will look up a couple of videos about combination style knitting and see what I can do. Maybe there are some tiny techniques that I can change and figure it out essentially. But yeah, I can definitely see here, it's very obvious now that this one is a bit bigger than this one, but I don't know how much I care. I mean, if I really cared, I would definitely rip this out and reknit it, but it's something I still have to think about, and definitely I think a question that I'll be able to answer once I wet block it. I do have to say, I weighed this sweater yesterday, and this got me very excited, right? Because I think in the original pattern, maybe about 400 grams of yarn is required for the smallest size. I might be incorrect on that one, but I weighed my sweater, and this is 225 grams, so very, very lightweight, and it still keeps me very warm. It's actually rather cold here in the Netherlands at this moment, and yeah, it's really nice. I have something underneath on. That's how I usually tend to wear my sweaters. But yeah, it's a fabulous sweater in my opinion. But going back to the weight, 225 grams, and I spent about €5 something for 100 grams of this yarn. So this cost me about €12 and 30 cents, €12 and 30 cents, something like that. And I was shocked and very happy, and oh, this, yeah, just this, in my opinion, there was a huge amount of struggle, but in the end, I think this was a success. So yeah, this is the fifth piece within the ISEA Archives collection that I have finished. I think I have about 7 to go. I'm hoping to finish by the end of March. Now, I still have one more thing that I managed to finish because it's such a small project. Ta-da! So, these are the Inga Socks by Agnes Brandels, and it's a free pattern from Järbo. I will leave a link to it, as always, in the description box below. So, this is made clearly not for me. It's for a baby that was born quite recently, and yeah, I wanted to make socks for the baby that could be used within the 0 to 2 months age. And I knit these up, but they seem to be quite a bit bigger than max 2 months. This looks more like 6 months. So I don't know what that's all about. I checked my gauge, and my gauge was actually tighter than in the pattern. So I don't know what's going on here. But yeah, I used some drops yarn that I have in my stash. I've spoken about this before, but I at some point had a ton of drops Nepal in my stash inventory, so to speak, and I used some of it. Oh, I have actually one project here. It's a tad bit dirty, but it's been well used since I actually worked on it. This is my crochet cow rug that I made maybe 4 months ago, 5 months ago, and yeah, it's used every day. I like it a lot, but I used drops Nepal for that, and for a vintage vest as well, and then I managed to sell a lot of it on the Dutch eBay. And aside from that, I also have a lot of drops baby, and no, drops baby merino, and I don't know, it's a superwash yarn, 100% baby merino, and it has a sport weight yardage. I think it's 175 meters per 50 grams. This is the color lavender, and it has a code of 15 or 25. 25. Yes. And I have tons and tons of it. from when I actually started to get more fanatic about knitting about 4 years ago, and that's when I figured that I actually don't really like this yarn all that much. I mean, it's perfect for babies because it's soft and it's machine washable, but I just don't like the squishiness of it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I've definitely noticed that I tend to lean more towards more rustic yarn. So I have a lot of it, and babies have just been popping up in my vicinity for a while, and I'm just thinking to either sell a portion of it and then knit up the rest for babies that are in my life. So yeah, this is a pretty straightforward sock. It's a top down. You do a cast on. Well, I did a long tail cast on. I don't really know what was in the pattern, but I did that one by one ribbing. Then you have this lace section that is done by yarn overs, and then yeah, knitting up stitches and then slipping one over the other, and then knitting straight stockinette stitch, and then doing a short row heel, and then knitting all the way down, and then decreasing at the toe. So I used 2mm needles for the ribbing and then 2.5 for the body, and it was just a very easy, quick pattern, and I will be shipping this off hopefully in about 2 weeks, because I want to make a couple more baby patterns. I'm just going to use a ton of free ones because last year I just scavenged the internet and found tons and tons of very cute baby patterns for free, mostly from, I think, Bergère de France, Cheval Blanc, I think is also the name of this company. Järbo is also a good one, and then Svarta Fåret also had a lot. Now, this is actually a new pattern. Well, new. The English version is new. It's been re-released, but before that, I think the pattern was only available in Swedish and in Norwegian, I think, and in Dutch. And so I didn't realize that the English one had been released, but I just knitted up using the Dutch pattern, and because of that, I now have almost bingo on my bingo card. I was looking at my bingo card. Okay, let me just explain this because it's been a couple of months since I made a video focused on this topic, but at the start of 2024 I created a bingo card with the with the goal of not obtaining all of my goals, but just getting a bingo, so that I would just be knitting throughout the year and unknowingly be crossing off things, and then maybe in the last month I would see that I needed one more goal to get bingo, and so that would be kind of the one goal that I would focus on to get the bingo, instead of being disappointed that I didn't complete 25 goals in total. Yeah, and I was looking at the card a couple of weeks ago, and I saw that I could get a bingo if I knit my boyfriend an extra sweater and if I were to use a Dutch pattern. And I tried knitting a pair of socks for myself, the Timmer socks, I think again by this same designer, and it didn't work out. But then I knit these ones and this did work out. And so now I can cross that out. And so now I only need to knit that sweater, and then I have bingo. And I think that that's going to be the only bingo that I get this year. But I mean, I'm more than satisfied with that. I think the next type of footwear for babies that I'll be making are these very cute, easy and quick slippers in garter stitch. Essentially what you do is you work up a T and then in garter stitch. So what you do is you knit a strip, then you cast on stitches on one side and then cast on stitches on the other side. You continue in garter stitch, you cast off, and then you sew it together, and then you have these really teeny tiny cute shoes. So that's something I'll also be working on coming week, and I think that's everything with regards to babies for now. I would like to move on to the Dagmar jacket, and this is the thing that has been costing me the most time this week. I think I lost about 3 days just trying to fix this. Let me first give you some information. This is the Dagmar jacket by Petite Knit. It's an all over drop shoulder cabled jacket, and the drop shoulder is created by casting on stitches, then increasing rapidly, knitting down, picking up stitches, knitting down as well, doing the neck shaping, of course, attaching the back to the front, knitting down again, doing the ribbing, picking up stitches for the sleeves, and then doing the same thing essentially. Yes, so I decided to make quite a number of modifications. So I wanted to take off about 11 centimeters of the armhole depth. I wanted to increase the length of the cardigan by about 3 centimeters, and I wanted to decrease the inner sleeve length, or no, decrease the upper, wait. I also wanted to decrease the upper arm circumference by about 3.5 centimeters, and then decrease the bust circumference by about 7 centimeters. So from 107 to 100 centimeters. This is all, by the way, a size 1. And in terms of the construction, I wanted to change the trapezoid to a kind of classic Guernsey style construction where it's just a straight block and you cast off stitches for the armholes here, and you have some neck shaping at the front and in the back so that the back isn't riding up. And I had first tried to do this whilst keeping the same direction, so starting at the top and then knitting down, but it was quite fiddly with the back because I would have to cast on 2 sections, then knit up a couple of rows whilst increasing, and then casting on with something like a backward loop, cast on, and I don't know, I just didn't have that much motivation to do that, so it kind of stayed dormant for about 2 weeks, and so I felt that I had to reconsider the way that I was constructing this sweater, and I figured out that maybe it would just be best to start bottom up. With that come a number of calculations, because you have to be sure that, well, the thing for me that I also wanted was that I had a nice how would I say that, a nice the top, basically I wanted the tops to align, and so you have to do quite some planning. You actually have to know exactly where to start the armhole shaping so that you have enough length at this portion right here. And I had made a swatch for the honeycomb section, and it had supposedly the same row gauge as in the pattern. In any case, I did the calculations and they seemed to be alright. However, I was a bit off with my row gauge, which wasn't actually the end of the world, but yeah. I should also tell you the yarn that I've been using and the needles. So I used Järbo Svensk Ull 4 trådar. that was a bit rough, but my apologies. It's a 100% Swedish wool, and it has a yardage of 67.5 meters per 50 grams. So it's an Aran weight yarn. It has the code 59108 pine tree green. And yeah, as for needles, I used 4mm for the ribbing, and then I've been using 4.5 for the body. This is how far I am at the moment. I split the back and the front on one side. As I was knitting, I ended up checking the gauge, and my gauge, well, my row gauge was slightly off. It was a bit larger. No, it was a bit looser, and so I had to start the splitting for the armhole. So I ended up having to change where I started the armhole shaping, which was a bit tricky because I still wanted the front to match the back, and I had expected that I would have this type of section at the top here, and in the end my row gauge was so off that it was better to just actually have half of a diamond here and then half on the other side, which in hindsight actually works out for me because it's far easier to do a 3 needle bind off to make it look seamless with at this point than at this point, because you do have that double twist with the cabling. So it kind of worked out in my favor, but I don't know how much this is going to grow once I block it. I did block my swatch as well, but in the end it is kind of an oversized sweater, and I did make my own smaller, more fitted than, or had calculated to make it a bit more fitted than the original. So if it does block out quite a lot, then it's not the end of the world. It will just look a bit more like the original. But yes, the right front is done. I had initially planned for an armhole depth of 20 centimeters, but it ended up being 22, which I still don't mind. The original was 31, so that would have been all the way here instead of now it being here, because this is about 17 centimeters, and then this is 22, something like that. Yeah. I think it looks quite nice. The thing is, the reason why I lost about 3 days to this jacket is because I had actually messed up the diamond section. The section that was one of the largest ones and also appear 4 times. What happened was that I didn't realize that there was a double twist here, and I was about here when I realized it. So I could have actually just unraveled this entire section and then just reknit everything, and that might have cost me a day. But I did want to learn how to ladder back and fix it in that sense. So I did that, and it was miserable because I was just not getting it right. I think the first 2 that I worked on, I had to redo about 3 times each. So laddering back, knitting it, realizing it was wrong, laddering back, dropped the stitch, had to reknit it again. It was a lot of work, but I am very happy that I did do that. I was aware that it would take me a lot of time to get this fixed, and most likely more so than just redoing the entire thing, but it was for me a learning moment. It was a skill that I wanted to learn, and I definitely got a lot of learning opportunities. But yes, as you can see, I have fixed all the I have fixed all of them. So I'm very happy with that. So this front is actually ready for a 3-needle bind off. I think what I'm going to do next is knit the back, do the 3-needle bind off, and check how it looks. And yeah, once I'm done with that, I might actually just go ahead and knit the button band and the collar section, and then I will start working on the sleeves. I do have to make some more calculations for the sleeve as the armhole depth has changed, but I don't think it's going to be all that hard. I just need to add a couple more moss stitches, just have to figure out how many. But yeah, aside from that, this has been a delightful project, very easy to knit. I like how many cables there are. Well, I like that I got to practice a lot knitting cables without a cabling needle, and yeah, I'm just very happy with the learning experience that I've got so far from this jacket. Definitely a lot more things have started to click in my brain, so I'm very happy with that. I think that's everything I have to say with regards to the Dagmar jacket. Then I have a tiny update on the grid shawl by Yokohata Kazekobo. I have finished the first block pattern, the block section. So the thing is, I didn't start with the new color because I have lost it. It's somewhere in my apartment. I just have to spend some more time looking for it. But yeah, so far so good. I'm liking the project. A couple of rows every couple of days, and yeah, I think hopefully it'll be done by the end of the year. That's definitely my goal, having it done when it's actually really cold here. Yeah, maybe some a bit of information. This is from Yokohata's book Makimono. It's a book filled with shawls slash scarf knitting patterns. I'm using Holst Garn's Titikaka, which is 100% alpaca. It's lace with yarn, 400 meters per 50 grams, but I'm holding two strands together. The colors that you're seeing are mahogany, that's the brown here at the start. It has a color, or it has a code of 38. Passion, that's the cobalt blue color you're seeing. It has a code of 22, and then Amazon, which has a code of 11. As for knitting needles, I'm using 3.25 millimeter needles. I actually got knitting needle stoppers for the first time. I didn't really know what the use of it was, or rather I never really felt that I would actually need them, but I have had a couple of experiences when, for instance, I tried something on or what have you, and the stitches fell off, and these have actually been great. Not really for something like this, I just put them on because they kind of looked cute, but for the Dagmar sweater, when I was working on the cables, I mean, well, oh, I don't have the needle on there. I was using 100 centimeter needle. Yeah, no, I was using circular needles with a length of 100 centimeters, and that works great for when you're working on the body of a cardigan, but when you're working on one section in between. It's just a bit too short to keep all the stitches nicely on the needles, and so when I plopped these stoppers on, it was magic. Well, not really, but it was very helpful, and I didn't have to worry about another thing whilst I was working on trying to fix those cables. So I think that is everything in terms of the projects that I worked on in the past week. It's mainly just been the Dagmar jacket, to be honest. But I did knit up a couple of swatches one morning because I want to actually actively work on projects that I said that I would work on in that autumn knitting plans video. And I have been. I finished one scarf, working on the second, but as for actual garments, aside from the easier archives, I haven't really done all that much. But yeah, I just needed to start off with swatches just to see. Yeah, I just figured maybe it would be good to start with swatches, and then that will motivate me to continue. In any case, yes. So here's my first swatch. Now the thing is that there's a reason why I knit this swatch so short. I will explain later. But first, I found this very cool idea online with regards to marking your swatches, the needle size that you use for it, because sometimes, well, what I used to do is I used to take a picture of the swatch, put it on my Notions project page, and then I would type out the needle size. But sometimes I would forget to do that, and then I would forget that I knit up a swatch, and then I wouldn't know which size I used, and so the swatch became useless. But online I found that people actually just do yarn overs somewhere on the swatch, and then that is kind of the amount of yarn overs you have is the equates to the amount of millimeters. So wait, let me explain this. Okay, so here at the bottom, I don't know if you can see it all that well, but there are 3 yarn overs, and then there's a purl stitch somewhere here on the side. So that means 3.5 millimeter needles. And yeah. So now I know that for this swatch I used needles of 3.5 millimeter. So this is a swatch for a vest from Jack Frost that I was planning on knitting. So it's from their Speedy Knits volume. I'm not too sure which one, but I will leave a link to it in the description box below. But it was this very cute vest that had an interesting ribbing on the body. I wasn't too sure what I would call this. I was actually quite confused because the way it's knit up is that you have an even amount of stitches, I believe. Yes, you have an uneven amount of stitches. It's 4 plus 1. You start off with a knit stitch, and then you purl 2, knit 2, and then you continue with purling 2, knitting 2. Then you work on the wrong side, and then again you knit 1, and then you purl 2, knit 2. The type of fabric that gets produced is this, where the front looks the same as the back. Essentially what you have here is you have one column of knit stitches, and then you have one column of, I guess, moss stitch, because it's purl, knit, purl, knit. Is that so? Wait. No, well, Okay, I spent about a minute just kind of spacing out and thinking about it. But must stitch obviously has to do with the columns next to one stitch, if that makes any sense. This is essentially, it's, yes, so it's just a column of knit stitches, so stockinette, and then you have one column of garter stitch, so knit on both sides, and then you have a column of purl stitches, so reverse stockinette, and then again you have the knit on both sides type thing. If I don't know if that makes any sense. Yeah, so that's the pattern. I tried looking this one up in my I tried looking this up in my stitch dictionary, and I couldn't find a name for it. But I would love to hear if there's a name for it. So let me know if you know. But yeah, the reason why this gauge swatch is so short is that I really only I felt that I actually only needed to know the stitch gauge, because I'm working this in the kind of conventional vintage 40s 50s style, which is just bottom up. And at the start, at least with this pattern, it's not that necessary to know your row gauge, because you first start off with casting on stitches, you do some ribbing, then you increase a number of stitches. Yeah, and then you just knit up straight for a couple of centimeters or a couple of inches. And so what you can do is, when you are knitting up that straight section, you can just block it. And then I feel that you would get an even more accurate swatch than if you were, to just calculate it from this. So yeah, I think that that's also a benefit when it comes to knitting bottom up, at least the ones that have a very straightforward, simple construction at the bottom. Because when you're knitting top down, you have to think about the row gauge a lot, with the neck hole shaping and the armhole shaping. And at the start, definitely you don't have good blocks where you can actually check your gauge. So I found a new advantage to knitting bottom up. That's everything about this watch. I also knit one for, what do I call this? Yes, Model 1 of Constanze Strickmode, issue 2 from 1952. It's a German knitting pattern magazine. And yeah, it's just stockinette stitch, but the pattern itself is 2x2 rib, and I was a bit confused because I don't really know how to measure the gauge for ribbing. Found another Roxanne Richardson video, and turns out that you can just do it in stockinette stitch, and that'll be a lot easier. At least how I have it now in my head is, so usually, right, if you want to, okay, so you knit up. Yes, I do have to think about this for a while. So how I'm going to do this is, I'm going to measure the gauge of this one, block it, then measure it again, and then when if I feel that I have the right numbers, something that I'm content with, I will go a needle size down for the ribbing. I don't know if that makes all that much sense, but maybe I'll explain this once I start working on the sweater. But I was thinking quite a bit with regards to the type of yarn that I wanted to use for the top. It uses Angora wool and it's really lightweight, and I guess I could achieve something similar if I were to use silk mohair, but I didn't want to do that, and so I just looked in my stash, and then I found that I had this bright red yarn from Hjertegarn called the Vital, and I had a sweater's quantity of it. I was actually thinking of using this for a heavily cabled knit sweater, and I think I'm just not gonna do that. So that's what I have for that. Some Plötulopi again. I had 200 grams of this yarn, and I was thinking what I could make out of it. And since this is about 225 color work, I figured I would be able to get a V-neck sweater out of this. So I found a vintage, I think it's Bernat, vintage knitting book. It's I will leave a link to that in the description box below, but it's all about knits for young women who are at university, and they're quite stylish pieces. And one that really caught my eye was this 3/4 sleeve V-neck sweater, and I thought this would look very nice. So yes, it's Plötulopi. It has the code 2024. I think it's called Meteorite because it's black, but it has all these different speckles. So yeah, it's heathered. Would you call it heathered with different colors? So there's some blue, some red, some yellowish green type stuff in there, and I thought, from far away it just looks like something plain black, and when you're a bit closer it has some more intrigue, so I thought that would be really cool. So I'm very familiar with this yarn, knitting this just with 3mm needles, one strand, and so I took that gauge I was familiar with and then I converted the pattern. I think the original pattern has a stitch gauge of 24 stitches per 10 centimeters or 4 inches, and I have 20 with that. So it wasn't all that hard to convert things, but I feel like this is something that could knit up really quickly and would be very suitable for this time of the year. So there is that. The last thing I would like to talk about is a new vintage knitting book that I managed to find online, and I just had to talk about it because this is something that I've been looking for maybe 6 months at this point. I got really into vintage Dutch patterns, and I I came about Magriet breishow. It's a magazine that came out once a year from the women's magazine Magriet, that is still active in the Netherlands, and it's just very stylish, very beautiful. It's not that hard finding the magazines from the 80s and 70s. I even have maybe 2 or 3 from the 60s, but what is very hard is actually finding one from the 50s, and this is my first one from the 50s that I managed to find. The thing is that they're rare, but not very valuable, if that makes any sense, because not many people knit vintage patterns. So I got this for about 15 euros. Some you can even find for 4 euros, but this one is a bit more rare than the ones from the 60s onward. So the funny thing as well is that there are actually a couple of patterns in here that I found in the German magazine Constance Strickmode. In one of these magazines I actually found the German pattern that I made a couple of months ago with the circular yoke and the ribbing, which was pretty cool. But so I found, it's really fragile. The front actually wasn't attached when I received it, but let me show you the piece that I thought was really cool. Yes, this one right here, it's number 74. It's really beautiful, it's very form-fitting, and it has, well, you can't really see it from here, but it's all over rib. and I just really love the lines in this design. So I am thinking of knitting that up. I was looking at the yarn that I had in my stash, and I have about 350 grams of this yarn from Ístex. It's actually a fairly new yarn that came out. I think it's Plötulopi. It's sportwear yarn, and I have 350 grams of this brown yarn right here. Yeah, so I knit this on 3mm needles. I was actually trying to swatch for another project, but it turns out that I messed up the the swatch. It was supposed to be twisted rib, but I think this is a nice color to add to my well, actually it's basically the same as this color, but the thing is that I think I've said this before, I'm thinking a lot about personal style and things and colors that I would like more in my closet. I've knit a lot of green stuff, and I would like to add some more blue and browns and reds, all darker tones, and some more pops of color, such as this red and this collar block scarf. So that's kind of where my mind is at now in terms of colors. And of course, I mean, again, we have the dark red here, and also some gray as well. I think that's I think that's the name. It's I think a couple of weeks ago I spoke about how I needed to rework the Japanese pattern that I've been working on throughout the year. It's a ski, yeah, it's a women's, no, it's a 15-year-old girl's ski set, and my gauge has just been completely off. Things were not working out, and I had to go back to the drawing board, try to figure it out. Didn't work out. Now I'm back at the drawing board again, and I have a swatch or a mitten that is now a swatch for knitting in the round with this yarn, and yeah, now I have a swatch for knitting pieces flat. So yeah, I still need to block all of these pieces. I've just not had the time to take their measurements, but yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to take the measurements, block them, and then see what I could potentially start or continue working on today. So yeah, that's everything. Wasn't that much of progress, but a lot of things I learned. I learned a lot of things this week, and so I'm very satisfied with how it went. Very much so looking forward to coming week. I'm looking to mostly write things. I've actually been working on some calculations with regards to this polo shirt thingy that I drafted myself at the start of this year, and looking to start grading that. Looking to start grading the Rosamond vest, and yeah, just making modifications to my knits. So I think it's mostly just going to be a very technical week that's coming up, with some baby knits here and there, and some progress with definitely the Dagmar Jacket. I want to at least finish the body next week. So yeah, I'm sorry that this podcast was a bit less organized than I usually am, or maybe not, I don't know, but I'll see how that goes in editing. I'm gonna try and make it a bit more streamlined. In any case, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon in a new video. Bye bye.